Harry, let's start with the question that's on everyone's mind. We got a controversy in Champaign.
Yeah,
Caleb Griffin or David Alano, what would you do?
I'll tell you what, man, when you got two guys that can really boot it out there. No, I know exactly where you're going. I mean, I was I was more obviously invested. I had more personal stake the last time anything even close to this came about with, I guess, what would have been Wes and Riley. But you can tell me this I think like is a little bit more people invested in, like, who's got to be the guy, right? Because then you were kind of scrapping for a bowl game. You were seeing if you can maybe sneak in and get those 6 wins in those last 2 weeks. This one, it feels like it means a little bit more, just because if you are able to get one of these last two at least, I mean, that's two bowl games in a row for Illinois. I don't care what you say, that's big.
It is
You
big.
know, if and this is like the floor. This is the floor that we were hoping for. And I mean, after last year, you say that you have a down year next year and you still make a bowl game, you're going to take that as an Illini fan. And I mean, God, I mean, if you ask me right now, I think I think you have to go with Paddock. I mean, it's a weird situation because if you had won that game and he was kind of playing the role of an Artsikowski and just kind of like manning the ship as you get through that game and you win it ugly, maybe like 20-14. Then you go back to Luke. When you have a guy come out after a heroic game-winning touchdown drive where he was perfect, and then the next game he's virtually perfect minus one mistake on the interception, and sets a stadium record. I didn't even know if it was. I didn't know if it was of a school record. I now know that it wasn't. But over 500 yards, man. I don't care like who you're playing. If you're playing a Power Five school, that's an insane stat. So I mean, I think right now, and plus since there's not going to be any controversy next year. Luke's got plenty of years to go, and this is the last couple weeks for Paddock. I think you have to go with him.
I want to ask you about what you saw Saturday, because I will say from the stands, we knew maybe midway through the second quarter that this was different. It was a 27-12 game, at which point it looked, oh boy, we might get blown off the field here. And then Paddock, who had already shown a few throws earlier, just went nuts. And that is thanks, of course, to great receiving core, Reggie Love, sneaky great game, which opened up all the passing lanes because of how effectively you were running it. But 20-yarder after 20-yarder, literally averaging 20 yards per reception. That's how good this passing game was, albeit, yes, Indiana. But from the stands, it felt like we were watching something special. From your perspective, having seen it on TV and honestly probably a better vantage point of, the plays as they were unfolding, what was the most impressive thing to you outside of just the sheer statistical brilliance of it?
I think one play that kind of encapsulates, where I'm going to focus on is the offensive line. That's just nature of how I look at the game, and the one play that encapsulates the I guess maybe the growth that they've had, because they were not looking good earlier on in the season. On the Reggie Love, I think it was 37-yard touchdown run that I believe put you up. What would that have been, like 39-27? I believe it was. And when he was at the line of scrimmage, I saw the blocks kind of taking place as he's running out to the right. Before he even cuts up field, I'm watching the game on my phone, and I just say out loud to myself, touchdown. Because you could see the blocks forming. And to kind of see that your guys are getting to their second level defenders and making these blocks and springing these big runs. I mean, that was the most impressive thing that I saw the other day, because we can talk about Paddock, what hasn't been said. Isaiah Williams with, I think, what do you have, 200 receiving yards, something insane like that. Bryant had a couple big catches. Casey Washington had, a touchdown in the first half. I couldn't. Who was it who had that catch late in the game? 1 foot bent at like a 90-degree angle, falling backwards out of bounds. I mean,
That was Ashton Hollins, who came in for Bryant and had 3 catches for 46 yards.
Yeah, Hollins with arguably one of the most impressive catches of the day, probably the most impressive catch just athletically. And what you can kind of tell, aside from what I was talking about with the offensive line, is just every time the ball left Paddock's hands, it seemed like it was softly placed in like whoever receiver, whoever he was going to. It didn't look like he was maybe straining for anything. It just kind of looked almost effortless. And I don't know like what that says about how he's throwing it, maybe, or maybe, if maybe that's just a credit to a bad Indiana secondary, but you did see that not only, I mean, when you're putting up 500 yards through the air, you're probably going to be doing so, making it look easy, and that's what he was doing.
Yeah, it did look effortless. And I also agree that there's this softness to his throws that it seems the old adage, he throws a catchable ball. And it really does seem that way. And I think Luke actually does too. I think they both have really good touch on their passes. So today I want to read you this quote from Bret Bielema. And I know that the general consensus was that Bret Bielema came out and he said, Luke Altmyer is our starter. He did not say that. I want to read to you exactly what he said and get your take on what this means. Is it gamesmanship, etc.? He
By
said,
the way, there's going to be a live reaction to this because I don't know this quote yet.
okay, so this was on Sirius XM's Big Ten Radio. And the quote was, as of yesterday, Luke has been totally cleared to play. Because of that, he is our starting quarterback before he left. And that's where I sort of see it now. If there's any part of that that gets gray, we have a guy that has proven he can play. Sounds like a poem, kind of rhymed there at the end. But as the days went on, just to give you a little more context, Harry, about an hour and a half ago as we record this, Bret Bielema retweeted a Big Ten Network tweet of Paddock to Williams and their amazing connection with the text, "The best is yet to come," #family, #ILL, of a John Paddock, Isaiah Williams thing.
Yeah.
Extreme gamesmanship to you.
Man, I think that's him kind of. He knows how to work social media, or at least he's very active on social media. I mean, the poem, the statement he had on Big Ten Radio, that does sound like that's not a definitive John Paddock, or not John Paddock, Luke Altmyer will be starting this Saturday. That's not what that sounds like to me. That sounds like that it's coach speak, because the fact that he said he has been cleared and he is our starting quarterback before the injury. I mean, well, obviously that was the case. So, I mean, you're basically just saying you're telling us nothing new, and here's the fact of the matter: he's not going to say who's the starting quarterback until the very last second that he needs to, because think about it: you have two kind of different types of quarterback. You have more of a pocket passer in a Paddock, and more of a guy who has a little bit more mobility and maybe more of a gunslinger in Luke. And you're not going to want to let Iowa know who they're going to go up against, especially with the ability that defense has. It's a good defense. So I mean, the radio appearance, I see that as him just having fun, and then the liking of a tweet or the retweeting of a tweet, that's cheeky. That's the term that comes to my mind.
Yeah, it's a fun cheeky when you're 5-5 and starting to win games against, like, that's our old Bret. But
yeah,
now I was thinking about this, and when I look at this game and try to think about the advantages here, I want to ask you what you think is the bigger advantage against this Iowa defense. The two options here are the mobility that Luke Altmyer brings. The second option is the relatively quicker release of a John Paddock, because as far as time behind that line, there's about 0.15. I think PFF did this. I want to say Paddock is about 2.5 and Altmyer is closer to 2.7 in terms of how long it takes to get the ball out. Now, granted, the offensive line, if they'd played that well all season for Luke Altmyer, I think Luke Altmyer would have had an even better year, and he's been pretty good. But what do you think is more valuable, the ability to run or the ability to make quick reads against this Iowa defense?
I mean, I think it's got to be the ability to get rid of the ball quicker, because you think about mobile quarterbacks who are able to move around and maybe evade pressure. Yeah, they make it look spectacular, But I mean, who do you think's got sacked more times in their career, Michael Vick or Drew Brees? Because I don't see anyone get rid of the ball faster than Drew Brees, and he's never on the ground. Michael Vick, I think, had multiple years where he was the most sacked quarterback in the entire NFL. So Luke will make it look more extraordinary. He'll get away from a couple sacks that maybe Paddock wouldn't, but at the end of the day, the ball's already out of there. Doesn't matter.
I was watching well, actually, heck, the game on Saturday. I thought that the reason that Sorsby was so effective was same thing. He was getting it out relatively quickly and negating your strength on offense. Now, I want to switch to the defense because, the Paddock talk and all of that has been understandably the thing for the last 4 or 5 days. But the defense, there are concerns, okay? There are major concerns from what we saw in the Indiana win, as thrilling as that was. And part of what I thought was effective for Indiana was that Sorsby got it out quick, negating the pass rush and really nullifying what a Johnny Newton could do. And your secondary was really dropping the ball. Do you feel more optimistic? Because I do think Sorsby is a quarterback that's on the up, and McCauley's just a bad matchup in terms of size. Do you think we see more of a second half against Minnesota type of performance from this defense against Iowa? Or can even a bad Iowa offense exploit what Indiana was exploiting?
Well, first off, I mean, that guy McCauley, my God, you knew where the ball was going every single time they dropped back to pass. You almost, exhaled every time they decided to run the ball because you knew it was an automatic first down, whether it was a catch or
Harry. They ran it well, and that concerns me for Saturday too.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Iowa, I mean, what can be said about Iowa's offense that hasn't already been said? The way I think that this game, if you play it like you did second half Minnesota, I think you have a real chance to win this game. Now, the way I see it going, maybe not as many points and at maybe exactly the same production because, you usually don't see 0-0-3 and then 19 point wise, which is what Iowa did against Rutgers last week. But I could see a very similar game in that, no points in the first quarter, maybe a touchdown, then maybe a field goal in the third quarter, and maybe another field goal or another touchdown or something like that in the fourth. I don't think that Iowa's going to break 20, but I don't know if they need to because as good as we looked last week with this offense, I mean, that was against an Indiana defense that I don't think is world beaters. We know that they're probably going to regress a little bit to the means. I think that this game basically boils down more so to what your defense is able to do than what your offense is able to do. Because we're going to score probably around 10, 13 points. But their offense is so atrocious that if your defense can just step up a little bit, man. I mean, if you're able to play them like you said, the way you played Minnesota, that might be enough. But if you play the way that you played against Indiana, I don't think Iowa's going to put up 45 points. They'll probably put up maybe 20. But like I said, that defense is just so good that I think you need an A plus, not an A plus. I think you need a B plus performance from your defense if you want to be able to get this win.
Yeah, and the thing is, there's no common opponent here. We can't say, well, how did Iowa do against Indiana? Because they didn't play. I was looking at Rutgers against Iowa, and they obviously got shut out. Rutgers put up 31 against Indiana. So, listen, we know Indiana's defense is not good. You were fantastic offensively, and that is kudos to Lunny and the team because that was a perfect game plan, executed to perfection. But, one thing I wanted to ask you about too, Harry, because it was the secondary that concerned me the most. The smaller guys back there struggled mightily against McCauley. This is more to do with Taz and discipline, which has been a problem for not just Taz, but the defense as a whole. Way too many penalties. What do you do if you're a coaching staff, given the nature of a game like football, when you have a player spit on somebody? My thing, Harry, that was tricky. I didn't want to make too big of a deal about it, but it's not cool.
No,
it's Bush League. So what do you do then? Do you discipline from within, or do you just move on and say, well, the penalty was the penalty. He was kicked out of the game and the punishment has been meted?
I mean, I've had instances more so in high school where guys on the team maybe did something, a little extracurricular like that. And it's weird. It's right. It's weird. It's if you pull a face mask or you shove someone after a play in the heat of playing, coach will get in your face and, tell you, what are you doing? That's ridiculous. He might even make you do some push-ups on the sideline or up downs at the practice on Monday. If when you do something like spits in someone's face or something off the field, that's when you have to, that's almost like the old saying of, don't worry about when your coach is yelling at you, worry when he's not. Because in that situation, if I were a coach, now I don't know if this is what Bret's going to do, or I don't know if this is what a coach would do. If I was the coach in that situation, I'd just sit down with the guy and say, listen, you do that again, you're off the team. Right now, I'm not putting that guy back out there for, I mean, maybe the first half. Because that's a thing, man, that it's so tough because it goes beyond the game. That's a character thing right there. If you're spitting in someone's face, that has to be dealt with. You need to tell someone, you need to show them that there have to be realistic repercussions for that. I don't care who we're playing this week. I don't care how big the game is. You do that. That's not what we're about. You can't be a part of this. So I think that this has to be a situation where it absolutely goes beyond whatever penalty it might be, or whatever immediate, maybe if he's ejected there. I think it goes beyond. I think it goes beyond just the immediate effect.
I mean, Harry, the penalties were why that game was so close. When you looked at the box score and you saw that you had 650 and they had, I think, 425, 450 yards themselves. Yeah, that's not a good defensive performance. When you add 140 penalty yards, it's basically a wash. So no wonder it went to overtime. And we know it would be more than obvious to say, well, you can't do that against Iowa. I don't think you can have more than 5 penalties against Iowa. So how does a team address that after a messy game? And sometimes I'm sure messy games just happen and they kind of get away from you. And it got chippy on Saturday. But is there such a thing as cleaning that up? Or is it literally a play-by-play basis where you just have to be honed in on everything?
I mean, the way I kind of just hinted at it a little bit, the way that my coaches would take care of it in high school and in college would be the first practice after that game, where he would say, all right, we had 5 penalties for 45 yards, get them chopping. We'd have to do 45 up downs at the beginning of practice. Obviously, when you get to the point where you had a game of over 100 penalty yards, you are dead before you even have to go out to practice. So that's kind of the way I think you have to address it, right? You can't just point it out in the in the film study. You can't just point it out during practice or during a scrimmage of practice, because at that point, someone says, all right, keep your coach says, keep your hands inside. You'll be like, yeah. You're not even thinking, you're just trying to survive. You're just trying to get the play done, get to the next play. Hey, it's practice. There's no penalties. The way that I think 2 ways they should go about it would be that external motivation of, oh God, I don't want to have to do X amount of up downs on Monday after this. But then what we were doing when I was there is we had a Big Ten official at our practices, and what that would do would be, he would literally tell us when we were holding, when defensive pass interference, offensive, any of that stuff, illegal formation, offsides, false start, everything. We had someone there to let us know what we could and what we couldn't do, and it's a little bit easier when, obviously it's easier because when you go through a practice with no official and you're just kind of depending on your coaches telling you what to do in film study after the fact, it doesn't set in as immediately as it does when you're playing a game. So hopefully they have some guys there coaching them up, telling them, yeah, that's not a great play that you just made. I don't care. You got to the quarterback. You put your hands in the center's face. That's a penalty. That's how I would probably address it, at practice going forward after a game like that.
One thing I didn't want to miss in talking about this team, and I think I talked about it Sunday a little bit, but resiliency, which is a buzzword for sports, I understand. This team was 2-4. So a month ago was October 15th. We'd have to go back to October 14th, the day that they played Maryland. 2-4, dead in the water. I was in Vegas trying to find any sports book so I could put $50 on Maryland minus 13.5 because I thought that was easy money. Did not find a sports book in time to do it, and I said, probably for the best. I don't like necessarily rooting or betting against Illinois. And then they win that game, Harry. And then after losing to Wisconsin, which was a devastating loss, going into a bye week, no less. I mean, what a bummer buzzkill to go into that. And then you went on the road against Minnesota, and I think outplayed them for most of the game. Same with Indiana. I think you outplayed them most of the game. You just let it get a little too close for comfort. What does it say about a team, despite the messiness and despite the flaws, that they didn't just go the way that many Illinois teams do when they're 2-4 and have tough games coming up?
It is. I mean, it's something that you can't really coach, and it's something that, as you're moving forward, you're not going to look back at this season as one of the years where, hey, Illinois had this great run. And, like last year, we started 7-1. We got up to, 16th in the country? That's insane for Illinois. That doesn't happen. It was an amazing year. But this year is going to be the one where hopefully, you finish with whatever, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? All possible, win totals at the end. It doesn't matter really when you're looking back. What's going to matter is how you won some of these games is so much different than maybe how you did last year or how we've done in the past. 2014, when we made the bowl game, we beat Minnesota. We got up big early, and then we had a defensive score late. There was no real drive. There was no comeback. There was no back and forth. Penn State, you're able to drive down late in the game, but that one was kind of a slugfest, just a slog. It was an ugly day. I remember it being really windy. And, Northwestern, you go out there and you kill them. This year, so many of the wins, I think most of the wins, aside from FAU, have been you have to do something late. Toledo, you had to kick a late field goal. Maryland, you needed the late field goal. Let's see, who's going back now. Indiana, obviously. Minnesota, obviously. The way you're winning these games, it's instilling in these guys who are going to be here after this year. It doesn't matter what the situation looks like. We know we've seen us win these games before. If we're playing Iowa this week and we're down 20-15 late in the game, knowing that you need a touchdown with a minute left, everyone on that field is going to think we can do this because we just saw this team do it 2 weeks ago. So I think that's so much different than when you're going into a situation – even if you have a similar win total, hey, we need to go score a touchdown. Like, what was it? 2015, I remember we were playing Nebraska in Lincoln. We should have won that game. I think they scored a touchdown late to go up by 1 score. And even though we had been leading the whole game, there was no real sense of, oh, yeah, we're going to go out there. We've been leading. We're going to be able to take the lead back, and we're able to win this game. This team, you can't say that because we've seen now on 4 different occasions this team is able to either come from behind or come from a tie game and able to win the game on the last drive of the game. That's something that I think is not really you can teach. It's something that a team just has, and if they have that attribute this season, you carry that into the offseason with new guys and older guys on this team that have experienced it. I think that's going to be a great experience to have.
I remember that Nebraska game, 2016, I think, leading into the fourth quarter. And was it Aaron Bailey was quarterback that game?
It would have been 2016 because 2015 you won. 2016 it was Wes Lunt was the quarterback of that game. I think what'd you say?
Reggie Corbin at running back that day. I mean,
I believe so because I think 15 was I think that was Kendrick Foster was your main guy. And I think Aaron left after the 2015 season, if I recall, because I think I'm pretty sure Wes was your quarterback for the 2016 season.
So as we look forward, I know that it would be. I want to go. Should we do the Iowa prediction, or should we predict how the rest of this year is going to shake out? Because I know it is kind of a futile endeavor, but it's fun. What the hell? It's a sports podcast. Yeah. I don't have a problem with it. Should we start with the Iowa game?
Yeah.
Now, I do want to point out, and I did in the opening segment or the main segment before you came on about this game, Cooper DeJean being out is massive. This is someone that can return any punt or kick that he gets his hands on. This is their best defender on an elite defense. He is dynamic, and I don't think it's akin to Illinois losing Johnny Newton for the second or the fourth quarter against Wisconsin, because the rest of Illinois' defense is whatever. Iowa's got plenty of great defenders, but I do think it matters when you lose someone that big. I think that plays a role into what our predictions will be. But I wanted to start with you. I get the feeling we have the same gut feeling. And while earlier this year, let's say before the Purdue game, a lot of our predictions were based on, well, they're bound to turn it around. I think we're at a different place now in terms of how we're making this prediction. And it might be based on truly what we've seen as opposed to what we hope we might see.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, at this point, you're going based off, you have a larger sample size of this season itself, as opposed to at the beginning of the year, you were saying, well, this team is still similar to the team we had last year, and we're just waiting for that team to show up again. By the way, Cooper DeJean's not going to be playing, but his brother, Cooper DeShorts, I heard he's getting the start. And the kid, he's a spry kid. He can really move out there. He's got length. He's got the speed too. Don't sell Cooper DeShort.
I like how his brother has a different last name. I think it isn't the Chinese language often when you see their names like Yao Ming. I think his first name is Ming or something like that, because the back of his jersey says Yao. We're like, how does that work?
Yeah, that the one I always think of is in Mulan. They call her Fa Mulan. Her last name is Mulan, and the family's name is the Fas.
Okay, got it. So Cooper DeShorts, yes, he's still going to suit up, and Cooper DeCax is the managing equipment manager, and he's a great kid by all.
You got to look out for Cooper DeGloves, man. That kid, Cooper DeGloves. Yeah, it's going to be cold out there.
Hey, actually, the good news is, kind of like last week against Indiana, the weather's not a factor. We've had a weird thing about bad weather or windy weather days in Illinois under Bret Bielema, and you wouldn't think it'd be that case, but wind, not good. I think from what I can tell, it's going to be just a mild, no issues, and I like that. So going into this game, considering Cooper DeJean being out, considering we don't know who the quarterback is, but we each have a hunch as to what it may be. And actually, hell, you could throw out a prediction depending on who starts a quarterback, if you think that would make a difference.
I hate to say this, but my gut feeling, and this doesn't mean I'll be shocked one way or the other. And of course, I'm going to be rooting my heart out. But I look at this game and I keep coming back to, I see in this game being a 23-13. Or maybe no, because that would mean they score some points, like a 2010, like a 17-7 or something, where you lose by 2 scores. And you're always kind of hanging around there. But this defense, man, this defense is too good. I mean, as bad as their offense has been, the only laps they've really had defensively was against a top 10 team in Penn State. And I don't care what you say about how their offenses looked against the likes of Ohio State and Michigan. They're still, when they're playing at Happy Valley, they're a damn good team. And, I just, that's the only time you've seen a hiccup from Iowa. And the offense is going to be what it is. Your defense has shown cracks. If your defense shows up, you have a real shot at winning this game. If your defense shows up and plays their best game, I think you can win this game something like 14-13. But I think otherwise you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have a hard time moving the ball, and I could see it coming down to an explosive play one way or the other, because neither one of these teams is going to be able, or Iowa isn't going to be able to sustainably move the ball because their offense is so bad, and our offense I don't think is going to be able to consistently drive the ball because their defense is so good. So what it's going to come down to is, can Isaiah break one, or is Iowa going to have some, I always feel like they have like a punt return, whether it's called off or if it's against us, that kind of turns the tide of the game. So I'm going to go, official guess I'll say is 17-10 Iowa.
Okay, cool. I'm bullish on this. And you remember last week I said, if they beat Indiana, I think they win out, right? And predictions are just what they are. If they don't happen, you can just say, oh, it was a prediction. But the Cooper DeJean thing, to me, lessens my concern about whatever does happen at quarterback. Now, I do think if you tell me I wake up Saturday and find out John Paddock starting, I'm riding that magical carpet ride and saying, yeah, you're going to get the win because John Paddock And I wouldn't need to explain anything else because this kid's on some kind of heater. Still think you can win with Luke Altmyer. Imagine last year if Devin Witherspoon goes out. Number one scoring defense in the nation. And eventually cracks will show. And if Devin Witherspoon, you take him out of the picture, I don't care who you put in there. That's just one less guy to worry about. And for an offense that's kind of cooking for Illinois, was cooking for the first 3 quarters against Minnesota, the first 3 quarters against Wisconsin, starting to develop consistency regardless of quarterback. I think Illinois wins 23-16. And I think the defense will make you nervous enough. And maybe it's a late score for Illinois. I don't know. But I get the feeling with this Iowa team that when you play an entire season putting that much pressure on one unit, I feel like eventually a dam is going to break. And when I looked at this Iowa schedule and they're 8-2, somehow they're 8-2. Of course they are. But what offenses have they played? I mean, Penn State was the one team that actually smoked them. But I'm going back over their schedule, and let me see if I can get this up here, Harry. I apologize. Utah State, Iowa State, Western Michigan.
But by the way, what the hell is going on in Ames with Matt Campbell? He should have probably jumped ship before Iowa State returned to the norm.
Harry, at their peak, Purdue still put up 350 yards against Iowa. I mean, Rutgers was a paltry 129. Northwestern and Iowa each gained 170 yards in that barn burner. Minnesota had, granted, only 240 yards, but they had a good split between passing and running. Now, I don't know the Caden Fagan situation. We'll know more tomorrow. I think Reggie Love is running pretty well, though, behind that line. And I just think there's enough signs offensively pointing to a surprising, how the hell did we just score 23 points in Iowa? The Cooper DeJean thing, that changed my prediction. I would have predicted like 17-16 Illinois because I was still bullish. But I do think that there will be opportunities for you to score. And I just get the sense the dam breaks here for Iowa. And here's the thing about home crowds, Harry. We see it at Memorial Stadium more than I'm sure Iowa does. But for as good of a football program as that is, as good as they've been at home in November, this is a fan base that feels like they have had the injury bug and a hex kind of against them this year. They have not caught any breaks of the injury bug. And if things start to go south for them, that's where home field is not always an advantage. And I just see it playing out like that for some reason.
Yeah, I could hopefully see a situation where this game kind of turns into, say, to go back to 2014 again. I mean, we played Penn State at home. Now, this one was at home. This one will be on the road. But similar situations. You're bringing in a backup quarterback who's kind of been lighting a fire under the team towards the end of the season. Penn State, I think, had the second best defense in the Big Ten that year. They were one of the best defenses that you had gone up against, probably the best defense you had gone up against that entire season. And that's what you're going up against right now. And I think it might be a situation where if you're able to keep this game close, where if it's halftime and I was up 7-3, or if you're tied at 7-7, then that's where the whispers start to come in in the crowd, where it's, oh my God, this is Illinois we're playing. We're supposed to be the 16th ranked team. I know we might be a little, that rating might be a little inflated. By the way, you like how I'm giving these Iowa fans just like, my thoughts, but it's coming from them. No, but I think that's a situation where if you let a team hang around, you always see it where it's like, geez, the Chiefs are playing, I don't know, insert team name here, the Broncos. And it's, Jesus, it's a one-score game. Why are you letting them hang around? And then you see the bad team able to. Actually, perfect example: Broncos Bills the other day. Why the hell were the Bills letting the Broncos hang around? And then what happens when you let bad teams hang around? They're one play away from beating you, and that's what happened. And if you are an Iowa fan and you're seeing Illinois, who's kind of on a little bit of a heater right now, 2 improbable wins in the last 2 weeks. Just improbable on how they shaped up. And you're looking and saying, God, this game is close too. You start to think, God, is this going to happen to us too? And when you can feel that energy, and it's palpable, when the home crowd is starting to murmur, you can feel it. Yeah, that's where it's almost a home field disadvantage.
Yeah, I just feel like they've labored to this 8-2 start. Now, they were very impressive in the second half against Rutgers, and maybe that's the carryover effect. And my prediction is just absolutely silly. And also, I want to clarify, my prediction does not mean that Illinois is good. I think we went this year not knowing if Illinois was really any good, but the key is simply this: making a bowl game. So this goes to the last question. One, will we make a bowl game? And two, what is the final record after, if there is a bowl game, what is the final record for this team?
I think we make a bowl game. What I'm basing that on is I think that regardless of what happens this week with Illinois, I think you're going to go into a situation at the end of the year where you have one of two realistic options. One, you're fighting for your life against a team that you have destroyed the last couple of years, where you need to get a win in order to get a bowl game. To add on top of that, if you are in that situation, and if Northwestern loses to Purdue this week, which could happen, Northwestern, as good as they've been, as in relation to what we thought they were going to be, they're still Northwestern. They still have the ability to put a stinker out there. If you're able to make them miss out on a bowl game and you get to go to a bowl game, that's where you see guys come out. And that's where college football is at its most beautiful, because that's where you're able to go out there and say, we are going to impose our will on them, and we're going to keep them from having an off season. I think, I already gave my prediction for what's going to happen this week. I think you lose this week. I think you beat Northwestern by whatever it is, 20 or 30, because that's what you're apt to do apparently under, Bret Bielema. And with that in mind, like I said, this team's a little bit different than teams in the past where they're able to win those games late. And when you have that attribute about you, it kind of, it tends to bode well for teams in the postseason. So I think if you do get to 6-6, I think you get to 7-6 with a win in like a Las Vegas Bowl or a Pinstripe Bowl, or a I don't even know what else, like a Little Caesars Bowl, whatever it might be. I think you lose this week, beat Northwestern, and win your bowl game.
I think that might be the most likely outcome. Well, I say likely. Here's the thing: 7-6, however they would get there, that's a win. That's 6-7. We know doesn't feel as good, though. You would get a postseason and just lose a bowl game, which there are greater crimes than losing a bowl game. But I think you're onto something with the bowl game, Harry, about the way this team wins and the weirdness of bowl games, and considering the fact that the only guy on offense, I guess maybe a Julian Pearl or Isaiah Adams would consider it as well, and that'd be a big detriment if they sat out the bowl game. But Isaiah Williams would be another one, but you would still have your quarterback. You'd have both your running backs in Fagan and Love. You would have Bryant and Washington and Ashton. Like, you'd have enough to score some points. You'd lose Johnny Newton, but you'd have the rest of them. I hate that we have to consider this for bowl games, but I understand it. But I do think that there is a distinct possibility that they can win these next two games. And I actually have to agree a little bit with the Northwestern point, because understandably people are nervous because Northwestern is getting plucky. Like Indiana, they're getting plucky. Where the hell is this coming from? They don't suck anymore. Well, yes, that was an impressive win at Wisconsin, but Wisconsin's in some weird tailspin. I don't know what the hell's going on with that. And I do think that sometimes these matchups, they just kind of get one-sided for a prolonged period of time. And it'd be difficult for me to imagine, when push comes to shove, whether you're 6-5 or 5-6, that you would go into that Northwestern game not bringing it. Because I will give Bielema credit. Those two Northwestern games, we have come out to absolutely murder them.
Well, I remember the 2021 game. I remember exactly where I was. I was at the gym, and I was listening to it on my phone, and also watching the stats and the drive updates on the ESPN app, because I forget what it was. I forget what my shift was, but I needed to get to the gym beforehand, and I wasn't going to watch Illinois play if we weren't playing for anything. We were playing for pride at that point. We weren't going to be able to get to a bowl game, but just listening to the game, looking at the stats, and then kind of following along with the highlights afterwards. I remember texting, I think it was you and Trevor, and just saying, like, guys, this is impressive. This is probably that was the most encouraged I was in a game that didn't really mean a lot in a while, because it kind of gave you an inkling of, okay, he's doing what you should do. You had the games earlier in the season. You had Minnesota, you had Penn State. Those were great. Those were great upsets that you didn't see coming. We have always talked about how you should beat Northwestern by 30, and even a very average to bad Illinois team should be able to do that. And that's exactly what they did 2 years ago, and that's exactly what they did last year. So I think if you get into that situation, you see it in college football all the time. It's not the NFL where seeing the Giants lose to the Cowboys 6 times in a row is crazy. How does a team lose that many times in a row? I mean, hell, Virginia Tech beat Virginia like 20 times in a row. Minnesota lost to Wisconsin like 15 times in a row. These teams play every year, and no one really thinks that's a crazy streak. You get to the crazy streaks when it's Kentucky, Florida going on 30 years. But in college, it happens because certain programs get into ruts and certain programs take off. And if you're in a situation where you're Illinois and you're winning these games against Northwestern by 30 every year, you should feel like, yeah, they might be good. Yeah, we might be down from where we were last year. But if you're able to win a game against an overachieving Northwestern team and you're an underachieving Illini team, which I think right now you would say that's probably the case based on what we were doing last year. I love where we're at, in accordance to where we were a month ago, but in a whole, it's an underachievement. If you're able to still win a game against Northwestern by like 20 or 30 points in that situation, that's where you just say, man, we don't have to worry about this team for the next couple of years.
Wouldn't that be nice? Harry, I think we'll probably have some interesting stuff to talk about next week regardless, because whether you're 5-6 or 6-5, this is a big game this weekend that will teach us a little bit about truly where this team is at, because I don't know how good your previous opponents have really been, though I don't really know how good Iowa is, other than we know 2 facets of their team are really good, and then the other one is pretty bad. But when we talk next Wednesday, well, actually, what's your Thanksgiving plans? Are you heading home?
No, I'm not able to head home. My parents are going out to New Mexico to visit my sister in college. So I was planning on doing a little stay-at-home thing where you kind of scale everything down. I'm not going to make a turkey. I'm going to make a chicken. I'm just going to make like a big pan of like cornbread. I'm going to make like a skillet. Excellent. So yeah, I love to cook. So yeah, looking forward to all the Thanksgiving foods.
Well, sounds good. I'm sure we'll be texting Saturday, and we both know that if they somehow got to win, I don't care how bad Iowa's offense is, that would be massive.
Let's root for an Illinois win, a Wisconsin win, a Northwestern win, and a Minnesota win, because that might lead us to an Illinois-Northwestern Lincoln hat battle for the Big Ten West. How about that? In front of like 10,000 in Memorial Stadium.
Can you imagine? I mean, the funny thing is, it could happen. It could happen.
It'll be wild.
Harry, we'll take care, bud. We'll talk next week.
All right.
All right. That's Harry Black joining us here on the 200 level, and we're going to sign out here and get ready for a big weekend ahead. So before we get out here, reminder, the 200 level brought to you by DP Dough, online at dpdough.com for all the best deals and prices, dpdough.com. Also, Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. That's Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. Also, State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Life, auto, home, business renters, you name it, Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. And finally, Owen Builders, online at owenbuildersllc.com. Patios, decks, home additions as well. Check out the gallery online at owenbuildersllc.com. For Champagne Showers Podcast Network, and for you, the listener, we appreciate you tuning in. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff wherever you listen or watch us. And we will talk soon. I will have my equipment in Michigan just in case something happens on Saturday and we got to do an emergency podcast. Wouldn't that be nice? Take care, everybody, and see you soon. It is the 200 level.